The friction of a modern sandbox. Modern open world games have an inherent contradiction built into their DNA. Developers spend hundreds of millions of dollars, thousands of hours, and unimaginable creative energy crafting impossibly detailed worlds. They simulate the way wind passes through pine needles. They render the exact way mud clings to leather boots. They build continents. And then, the marketing team or the UI designers get terrified that you'll get bored. So, they overlay a digital net, a mini-map tucked into the corner, a compass ticking at the top of the screen, and a glowing neon quest marker piercing through the atmosphere, telling you exactly where to look. The result? Most players stop looking at the world entirely. They look at the map, they follow the breadcrumbs from point A to point B, listening to NPCs dump paragraphs of lore, believing that this is how you consume the story of a video game. But when Pearl Abyss released Crimson Desert, it threw players into Pywel, a brutal, war-torn medieval fantasy world. It is a massive game. If you rush into just the main story, you're looking at close to 50 or 60 hours of political manoeuvring, cutscenes and dialogue. But today, I want to make a controversial argument. If you are only listening to the dialogue in Crimson Desert, you are missing the actual plot. The primary narrator of Pywel isn't Cliff. It's not the kings, the mercenary captains, or the gods. It's the dirt, and there's a time we started paying attention. To understand what I mean, we have to look at how games traditionally treat history. Usually, if a war happened 50 years ago in a fantasy world, you found out about it in one of two ways. Either you pick up a dusty book in a library and read a wall of text, or you talk to an old man at a tavern who says, the great siege of 49, many died. It's cheap, it's efficient, but it detaches the narrative from the gameplay space. Crimson Desert doesn't do this. It relies heavily on microgeography. Take, for instance, the battle-scarred cliffsides found throughout the mid-game regions. If you look closely at the rock faces, they aren't just randomized polygons generated by an algorithm. You can literally read the mechanical trajectory of the violence. You see vertical gorges where massive ancient siege engines scraped against the stone. You see sections of the cliff face that are completely virtuified, turned to smooth glass, hinting at an intense, unnatural heat or magical warfare the current characters in the game might not even remember. And look at the earth itself. The valleys aren't flat, they're uneven, pocketed with old, sunken craters that have slowly been reclaimed by weeds and moss. The game doesn't need to halt your progress with a flashback cutscene to tell you a catastrophic military engagement happened here. The land holds the trauma. When you ride your horse through these valleys, you are physically stepping through the graveyard of an empire. The geometry tells a story of violence that dialogue could only even sanitize. The environment storytelling becomes even louder when you examine the architecture of Pywel. Throughout your journey, you'll pass dozens of crumbling foundations. At a glance, to the average player sprinting towards their next faction quest, these are just generic ruins, visual wallpaper designed to fill space. But look at the structural hypocrisy of these buildings. What you'll notice is a distinct, brilliant layer of historical overlap. The lowest foundations are made beautifully cut, interlocking granite blocks. The geometry is perfect. It speaks to a civilization that possessed incredible engineering skills, stability, and time. But directly on top of these magnificent stone foundations, you see crude, hasty architecture. Rough-hewn logs tied together with rotting rope, chaotic mismatched stonework patched up with mud. This visual layout takes an unspoken story of systematic collapse, and it tells us that the current inhabitants of Pywel are primitives living in the corpses of giants. They didn't build these cities, they inherited them, and they don't have the resources, the knowledge, or the peace to maintain them. Every time you walk into a tavern that has a canvas tent for a roof, but ancient, immaculately carved pillars holding up the walls, you are looking at a society in a stage of regression. The NPCs will tell you about the local lord who's raising taxes. The buildings are telling you that humanity is losing its grip on this continent entirely. There is a profound loneliness to Pywel that the script completely ignores, but the environment leans into it heavily. In a standard quest-driven loop, the world feels alive, because people are constantly talking to you. You are the centre of the universe. You are the mercenary hero solving everyone's problems. The narrative revolves entirely around you and around Cliff's human agency. But when you step away from the roads, when you deliberately ignore the quest log, that's where I had the most fun. The environment shifts the narrative's perspective. You realise how deeply indifferent Pywel is to human existence. You find abandoned camps where belongings were left behind in a neat, orderly fashion, not raided but simply vacated. You see dried up riverbeds that used to support entire farming communities, now reduced to cracked clay. You see changing weather, rain, old wagons, wheel ruts, fog rolling over a field of ancient monoliths, dead trees standing like skeletons against a grey sky. The landscape all tells a story of climate shifts, of trade routes that choked out and dried, and of forgotten factions that were quietly erased by time rather than steel, and much, much more. The dirt tells you that long before Cliff ever drew his sword, and long after his mercenary band is forgotten, this land will keep grinding everything down into dust. It shifts Crimson Desert for a simple, heroic fantasy into something deeply melancholic and cosmic. The true plot of the game isn't whether Cliff succeeds. It's a slow, beautiful decay of the world he's fighting in. Pearl Abyss built an absolute marvel of an open world here. But they also built a trap. They gave us the tools to ignore it. They gave us the quest trackers, the fast travel points, and the endless menus because they knew that modern gaming has trained us to be impatient. We have been conditioned to consume games like checklists, clear this camp, talk to this NPC, level up this stat. There is them aspects of the game, but the real magic of Crimson Desert happens when you break that contract. So here's my challenge to you when you play this game, or really any massive open world that comes next. Turn off the HUD, hide the minimap, force yourself to navigate by the stars, the rivers, and the mountains, look at the stars and the cliff, read the overlapping history of the ruins, pay attention to the dirt beneath your boots, because the writers wrote a good script for the cutscenes, but the world designers, they built a masterpiece hidden right in the open. You just have to stop looking at the markers and start looking at the world. If you enjoyed this deeper look into how games tell stories without words, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments below what's your favourite piece of environmental storytelling in the game. Do you actually prefer reading the world, or do you just want a well-written cutscene? Thanks for watching. Get out there and explore Crimson Desert. I'll see you soon.